What is up, everybody? Welcome to Shoot the Gap, the IDP Fantasy Football podcast here on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network. Tonight, we're going to be talking NFL rookie landing spots for some of your favorite IDP fantasy football players. We're going to let you know which landing spots we liked, we didn't like, and how that ultimately is going to impact their fantasy football value going forward this year. So before we get into that, let's hit the music. So just to recap tonight's festivities here on Fantasy and Frames Wednesday, we kicked off the shows. We kicked them off at 4 p.m. today with our very first episode of Dynasty 365, where we had Tyler Heil, Justin, and Rich Sickles be joined by Faraz Siddiqui from Upper Hand Fantasy, talking about NFL draft fallout, followed by Justin, you and John McGlynn and John Laub just crushing it on Dynasty evaluation at 6 p.m. Eastern. Maybe give the listeners a little recap quickly of what we all were talking about on that show.
Yeah, we just kind of went through our tier rankings and where we'd be drafting guys, kind of where groups were going. So we talked about early quarterbacks, late quarterbacks, early running backs, mid running backs, late running backs, and the same thing with wide receivers. The early guys, the big guys, late guys. Going to first, second, third, fourth rounds where like the groupings were go, and then kind of who we were taking in those groupings. So if you're looking at, hey, I'm like mid third round, I need a wide receiver. Here are the guys that are kind of falling there, and who do you guys like first, second, third, fourth? So that's kind of what we did. We broke it down for people in their rookie drafts. Are trying to look at, okay, obviously Marvin Harrison, number one wide receiver. I'm not going to get him. I'm at the end of the first round. Okay, who do I need to be looking at there? So that's kind of how we broke it down for everybody at each position, and also added tight ends at the end. So John Laub was awesome. I mean, he's got his new rankings coming out. They're like literally coming out tomorrow on Player Profiler. So he gave you a little bit of a glimpse into what his rankings were by kind of telling you where some of the guys where he would take him. So great show. So if you didn't get a chance to watch it, go back, look at it on YouTube, check it out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff.
No, it was you and John McGlynn just do a fantastic job every time Dynasty evaluation is on. So definitely worth checking out during the day, as well as listening to, as Justin was just saying, wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as going on the Dynasty Evaluation YouTube channel, as well as the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. And while you're there at both channels, why don't you just hit that subscribe button, as well as that notification bell, so you're notified whenever Fantasy and Frames drops awesome information. We are now approximately 96 followers away from hitting that illustrious 1,000 subscriber mark here at Fantasy and Frames over on YouTube. So please head over there and hit that subscribe button. We would really appreciate that. Following up with the Dynasty evaluation, we had another episode of Dynasty 365 at 8 p.m. Superflex, Tight End Premium, Half PPR, Rookie Draft. And then, of course, the last hour on Fourth and Frames with Chris Battistell, Drew Scott, and Rhett Manuel, just talking about the fallout, the fantasy football fallout from the NFL draft. All of these shows you can go check out over on our YouTube channel. And if you're digging the podcast versions, you can check all those podcasts out tomorrow on Apple and Spotify when you get up early and you head to wherever you're heading to, or coming back from wherever you're coming back from. However you do it, you could have a podcast to listen to that's going to give you awesome information. But yeah, you're here with us on Shoot the Gap. We're talking defense. Overall, before we get into the specifics of players and landing spots here, JT, what was your overall takeaway as far as being an IDP fantasy football fan watching the results of the NFL draft?
It was offense early on in the draft. So defensive guys were dropping. To me, as an IDP player, I just see value. I feel like you're going to get real nice value on IDP players in IDP leagues this year because I think a lot of these guys are going to fall under the radar, might drop a little later than you would usually go in your IDP drafts. So that's what I'm keeping an eye out on in my leagues is like where are guys going to start coming off the board and who do I need to grab where? Because there's a few guys I think are going to go a little earlier than others that if I can, I'm going to wait on and see if I can get some real good value on a few of these other guys. Because we'll talk about it tonight, but I think some of these landing spots for IDP are way better than the draft position. And where some of these guys got drafted early, I'm not necessarily going to draft them early just because they got picked early in the NFL draft. So I know we always talk about landing spots for offense, but I think defense really matters this year. I think where some of these guys hit is going to make a bigger difference than where they necessarily got drafted.
100%. And let's just dig right into it. Let's go to a player that I thought should have been the pick for the Atlanta Falcons at number 8. I'm sure Keith Fleming of the Daily Fix show here would agree. For those who did not see Keith's yearly meltdown, what the Falcons do on draft night, you were not disappointed again this past Thursday. And here's the thing, 2 years.
I was dying, man. I was dying.
It was good, right?
Yeah, that's great.
I feel horrible for him because 2 years ago they didn't take Jalen Carter, and this year they missed out on somebody who I thought was on my rankings in terms of rookie prospects. My DL1, despite the neck injury, talking about Liatu Latu, and he ends up going 15 to the Indianapolis Colts, according to ourlads.com, which is not the be-all, end-all for roster and depth charts, but they have a lot of great information there, folks. He is currently slated in to take over Kwity Paye's role, which is sad. I always wanted Kwity Paye to turn out to be somebody who is a little bit more dominant than he had been. Starting to take over that left defensive end role opposite Samson Ebukam. Man, like in terms of just opportunity, like you have a space sucker, which is what I like to call elite defensive tackles with DeForest Buckner in the middle. If only there was that opposite player to Liatu Latu that would kind of help draw away blockers and give him true one-on-one opportunities, I would be ecstatic for this landing spot, but that's just not the case right now for the Indianapolis Colts. So I like the player. I like the talent. I'm not as high on landing spot here for him in Indianapolis for IDP purposes. I'm sure he'll be a great NFL player, but for fantasy football, I'm a little concerned. What are your thoughts here, JT?
So for me, he was slightly down my list. I think I had him originally. Let me pull that up real quick. Pre-draft, and then I obviously moved him up post-draft on my list. I originally had him slotted in as like 3 or 4 on my list. I actually slid him all the way up to IDP 1 for me post-draft.
Wow.
And here's why. He is when we talk boomer bust, I feel like he's that guy. I just think he has such a high upside if you're willing to take the chance on the injury concerns, which I was concerned about, but man, the Colts take him as the number 1 defensive player off the board. That eases my concerns a little bit. I mean, if their doctors looked at him and they're like, dude, we're willing to take this guy as the top defensive player, that eases my mind a bit. Here's what the Colts did at defensive end last year, and it wasn't great for IDP purposes, but it was good for the team. They had one of their best sack seasons in a long time. Like they put up a ton of sacks on defense. Now, no one player had a huge year, but they had a great rotation. I look at our lads too, and like I agree with you. If you're looking for depth charts, our lads is the way to go. Check them out all the time. They're who I always jump online and look at depth charts. Here's how I think this ends up going. They really like to rotate guys last year. I think Liatu, Kwity Paye, and Abumacan, I think those 3 guys rotate together. I think they play pretty evenly and they play a lot. I'm not super worried about that because I love Kwity Paye, and I actually still think Kwity Paye is going to be in the mix. I think Adebayo is the guy that's a little different deal, I think he moves inside a little bit. Here's what I think they end up doing. I think he ends up playing on passing downs and long situations. He comes in and plays inside, and they get Grover out of there. So Grover's their big run stopper. Grover Stewart, stud. He's perfect guy to play next to DeForest Buckner, but he's just a run stuffer. So I think Adebayo gets in there and plays a little bit more next to DeForest Buckner on passing situations. And I actually think this Colts defense, if the cornerbacks can play a little bit better, I actually really like this front now. I think this is a really nice move. I'm hoping, like you said, it doesn't kill Kwity Paye. I don't think it does. He actually looked a lot better near the end of last season. We knew he was going to take some work, but as a first rounder, people wanted him to come out right away and just be awesome. I feel like he's just coming into his own. He started to impress me a lot more near the end of last year than he had the last two previous seasons. So I really like him a lot. I still think he's going to be in the mix there. But Latu, he moves up my rank. If you're going to take him as the number one defensive player, and the Colts knew they wanted cornerback or defensive end, the fact that they said no, we're taking him, it really pushes him up my board. It really does.
Going next here in terms of defensive player off the board here in the 2024 NFL Draft, Seattle Seahawks taking Byron Murphy. You look at per PFF, just where he grades out. He is grading out in terms of all of college football, in terms of draft eligible players in 2024 as number 2 overall. He's one of the best graded pass rushing interior defensive linemen. He was number 2 in total pressures with 45. He had 6 sacks on the season, which had him tied for 7th. And now he's joining a Seattle team, where they have Leonard Williams, who they traded for from the Giants last year. They have Jaron Reed. They have, Boye Mafe. They have some pieces along that defensive line in that edge rushing situation, outside linebacker. But I really like the fact that they went after a defensive tackle who has pass rushing prowess and is not just a run stopping space eater. Real quick, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, if you're in a defensive tackle starting league, I think you got to take him pretty early. I mean, he has all the makings of that next stud interior defensive tackle. And we talk about this. I feel like I'm always repeating myself, but I feel like I should always bring it up. If you're in a league, IDP league that starts defensive tackle and gives you any kind of defensive tackle premium, like a tight end premium, you want a top end stud. You want those guys because they make a big difference because it falls off a cliff quick at defensive tackle. So it's like if you can have those high end guys, it makes such a difference next to your opponent who's playing a guy who's like lucky to score a 1.5, 2 points a game. So, those Aaron Donalds, those DeForest Buckners, those Chris Jones, I mean, those guys make a huge difference. I think Murphy's in that group. I think he's going to be a huge difference maker. It's always going to depend on, how your league drafts and where you take guys like that. Usually defensive tackles drop, but he's a guy I'm definitely in defensive tight tackle leagues. He's on my list, and I've definitely got an eye on him for sure. Because the thing you want to D tackle, can he run stuff? Yes, but you got to have a guy that rushes the passer. If not, if he's just a run stuffer, you don't even want him on your fantasy team.
No, you're 100% right. Let's go to the next guy. And this one I am really, really excited about. And I did not see them making this move in the first round. I got to be honest with you. But when the second it happened, I'm like, yeah, I really like this. And of course, I'm talking about Dallas Turner going to the Minnesota Vikings. They bring in Jonathan Grenard from Houston, the Danielle Hunter replacement. They bring in Andrew Van Ginkel, who had a really good year in lieu of Jalen Phillips being lost to injury, or whenever Jalen Phillips was out during the beginning of the season. Van Ginkel stepped in, did really well for IDP purposes. Jalen Phillips gets the season-ending Achilles injury. the day after Thanksgiving. It's Van Ginkel. Then eventually Van Ginkel goes down. Like it just was a tree of woes here for the Miami Dolphins. But whatever, Van Ginkel's back. It was a certain point during the season where you saw Andrew Van Ginkel and you're just like, he just earned his big contract at wherever he's going next. And that just happened to be the Minnesota Vikings. And then they bring in, at 17 overall, Dallas Turner here. I love this, but this also is very telling about Andrew Van Ginkel in terms of like, he may have a lock on the starting role now in, the 1st of May. I would not be surprised if Dallas Turner takes on the outside linebacking role opposite Jonathan Grenard by the time we get to the beginning of the season. Is that wishful thinking as well as, you know what I mean?
I agree with you. I think Van Ginkel in a redraft, I like him. Dynasty, I don't. Not with this Dallas Turner pick. I agree with you. I thought this was a great move by the Vikings. Danielle Hunter gone. Grenard, they got him, but you're like, okay, Ginkel, I like on the other side. I really like this move. I tell you what, for IDP purposes, Dallas Turner on the Vikings is so much more appealing to me than Dallas Turner on the Falcons, where a lot of people thought he might go, just because every time someone ends up as a pass rusher on the Falcons, it seems like those guys never work out. They just, even though no matter how talented they are, how high they get drafted, it always makes me nervous. I really like this spot for him, especially with Gennard on the other side. It's not like everyone's going to be paying attention to him. He's got a chance to kind of work his way in, but I think you're right. I think by the second half of the season, he's going to be playing a ton. I think this Vikings team is going to be in a decent amount of shootouts. So I like the pass rushing for these guys. So I like Dallas Turner here. I thought this was a prime landing spot, even though he went later in the draft than people wanted at 17. To me, IDP wise, that doesn't hurt him at all. Him going 17 or going 8 makes no difference to me. It really doesn't. I like the landing spot better. Him on the Vikings is prime for me. I loved it. He went from number 1 on my list to number 3 on my list. So not a big drop. I just put Latu in front of him, and I still had my favorite linebacker in front of him. But Dallas Turner is still number 3 on my list for IDP defensive players.
And one of the things we talked about in earlier episodes, looking at these rookie prospects, which if you haven't seen, you can go back and watch on our YouTube channel as well as listen to the Fantasy and Frames podcast. He's a good blitzer. We know how aggressive Brian Flores is as a defensive play caller in Minnesota. I just feel like this was a match made in heaven that nobody anticipated, but now that it's done, very excited, especially for Dynasty redraft. Probably, like you said, going the Van Ginkel route, just because right now he has the pathway to a majority of snaps. But I don't think by the end of the season that's going to be the case, just because I think Turner's going to kind of assert himself in that defensive edge rushing role. Speaking of asserting themselves, I want to get to the next player here. And Drew Scott, if you're listening, this is for you. A Rams fan, Jared Verse, going at 19 to the Los Angeles Rams. It doesn't hurt when you lose Aaron Donald, a dominant force along your defensive line, and you bring in a borderline elite college prospect in Jared Verse, pair him with his teammate Braden Fisk. It's not and then you have him play opposite of Byron Young. You got Kobe Turner there. The Rams are cooking. The Rams are doing something. They're not saying F them picks anymore. They're like, let's make these picks worthwhile. On an unrelated note, did you see the video that the Rams PR crew, which, by the way, if you're not following the Rams on social media, even if you're not a Rams fan, they put out such awesome video content. And one of the videos they put up there was that they had Les Snead on the phone with Braden Fisk. And he was like, by the way, we have a surprise for you. We're going to take you in the next couple minutes but we have somebody, a special courier, headed your way to officially give you the news in person, and it was Jared Verse. So his teammates showed
I
up.
did not see that. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to look that up
Yeah,
for
it was
sure.
really, it was very heartwarming. But like again, Rhett Manuel going to the Fourth and Frame crew, he put out a tweet which at first I didn't really agree with, but I had to really sit and think about it. And that is, man, if there's anybody for IDP that I'm really excited for, it's Jared Verse, because there's a clear pathway to more snaps than any other of the players that you and I have been talking about. We just mentioned, Dallas Turner has to compete with Van Ginkel. Liatu Latu, the rotation aspect that we're expecting out of Indianapolis that has been seen. And now you have Jared Verse, who should be on the field and not rotated out, I believe, as often as those two other players. So, yeah, I think there's a real good pathway to snaps here for Jared Verse. And again, you have the pieces, the younger pieces along that defensive line. This is something special here. And for Dynasty, I'm definitely trying to target him as one of my first or second picks. Just an edge rusher, because JT, we've talked about it plenty of times. Just like you said, for defensive tackle leagues where that fall off comes at you quick, so does just defensive line or edge rushers overall. Like eventually the defensive line spot, especially if you're playing in 3 position designation IDP leagues where you have a DL, a LB, a DB, like it's hard enough in redraft, right? To really time your draft perfectly to get those elite defensive linemen. Because if you don't, then you're playing the streaming game.
You don't want to play the streaming game at the end. It gets ugly. I've done it before, and it gets real ugly.
It's not great, Bob. It's not a great it's not a great thing. The same goes for Dynasty. You may have 1 or 2 more players, in your queue, so to speak, at defensive line, but there's nobody I think that comes close to having the great opportunity and situation that Jared Verse has. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
I am totally on board with you here. Also, I don't know if you saw the video of the Rams rented like this beach front like mansion for the draft. It was insane. I'm like, he's like, well, we've been in the office all months on end. We wanted to kind of mix it up. They rented this like all right on the beach, this 2-3 story pool, everything. They put all this Ram stuff in there. Freaking must be awesome to work for the Rams. That's all I'm saying. I was like, that's the greatest war room I've ever seen. But I agree 100%. I think it's a huge pick. If I'm going DN right now and I'm looking at this, I've got verse 4 for me right now. So we've already talked about 3 of my top 4 guys right now. Versus my number 4 guy. He's my number 4 guy in long term. But I have to be honest, like you just said, I think he's my number 1 guy if you want immediate production. There's no way he's fighting anyone for snaps. He is coming in day 1. He is the guy outside, opposite of Byron Young. I think he's in there. I don't think there's any way anyone's fighting for snaps there. He's in as long as good. I love the Braden Fisk add to that. I think Braden Fisk is in a defensive tackle league. He right now is my number 3 defensive tackle off the board, behind Johnny Newton. But I really like him as well. I thought it was a great pairing, and congratulations to the Rams. First round pick since 2016 when they took Jared Goff number 1. Now, that is John McGlynn style. Trade all your picks. Don't ever draft. That's John McGlynn style. He never drafts anyone. He trades every pick. He always is going for something. I was like, wow. But I actually thought the Rams were much better last year than I thought they'd be. Their defense, I think, played out of their mind. They did not have a ton of talent on defense, and they actually played way, way better than I thought they would. And then adding Verse and Fisk to this group, because Byron Young was a great pickup. Ernest Jones looked way better than people thought he would. But Christian Roseboom, not the greatest linebacker ever, but he was solid. And then they went and added Cameron Curl at safety, Tre'Davious White at cornerback. They added Cameron Kitchen at safety. This team, I tell you what, I was down on the Rams going into last season. I took the under on wins. I ate that one hard because I did not think I thought their defense would be terrible. I was not sure about Stafford. I didn't know if Kupp could come back. And man, they proved me wrong. I think this team is right in the mix in the NFC, and I like this defense. I'm loving Verse. I'm loving. If you took Verse, honestly, if you took Verse as the number one defensive end in your IDP rookie draft, I wouldn't even shake my head at you. I'd be like, oh, okay. I actually like that. I could totally see him being the number one defensive end off the board. Clear cut path to playing time. And I actually think this, like I said, this Rams defense is much better than I thought they would be.
100%. In terms of, going to our next player, in terms of expectations, I did not really expect Chop Robinson to be the next edge rusher going off the board here, just because, we saw limited production in college. We saw that and read from scouting reports that like he's a bit raw here, but man, did he tear it up at the NFL Combine. And I feel like that kind of helped inflate some of his draft stock. And he goes to the Miami Dolphins. And, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but, the drafting of him in the first round and then the drafting of Muhammad Kamara, who played lights out at Colorado State last year. I mean, there's certainly the Miami Dolphins, that is, they're covering their bases for Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. You know what I mean? Because they want to get insurance coverage. They don't want to bring back Melvin Ingram when they're going to play Kansas City in the playoffs. They want to develop some younger talent just in case, things go wrong, which there has been a history there injury-wise with at least Bradley Chubb. Knock on wood, that's not the case for Jalen Phillips. This to me, however, feels more of a depth piece than it does something for fantasy that I would be wanting to, acquire quote unquote assets with. What are your thoughts on Chop Robinson?
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like he's more of a depth piece. I don't know that he gets that much playing time this year. He still needs some work. I think he's got all the traits. I'm hesitant on him. He's a guy, if he falls to me, I probably take him, but he's not a guy I'm like actively going after.
Right.
I'm just not 100% sold on Chop. Um, pre draft, I had him in my top 10. I've got him 7 right now, but I have to be real honest with you. He's probably closer to like 12 or 13 for me. I'm probably going to move him back in my rankings just because the Dolphins, I feel like you're right. He's the backup plan in case those guys aren't healthy. I just don't think he sees a ton of action. If you're like you like the athleticism and you're like, oh, he's gonna be good, and you don't need him, I'm all about drafting him, put him on your taxi squad. If you got a taxi squad, you got space, you want to sit him on there, it's totally fine. I know a lot of people don't like to put defensive guys on taxi squad. They want those guys to play right away. So Chop is I'm not against him by any means, but I feel like I'm losing luster. Like he's losing luster for me. He's kind of moving down just a bit. I don't love him.
Speaking of losing luster, I don't know if this next player has lost some luster. I think it's just delayed luster. And that is the Fighting Illini's own Johnny Newton going to the Washington Commanders. We know there has been rumblings of Jonathan Allen being potentially packaged into trade deals. The Commanders just re-signed Deron Payne last year to a pretty decent contract. And here you go, Adam Peters in his first draft going with best player available. And man, I mean, Johnny Newton just kind of checks off all the boards, all the marks you want for the interior defensive lineman, pressures, defensive stops. I mean, you name it, this guy can do it all. So for Dynasty, I'm extremely excited, and we'll definitely, especially in defensive tackle leagues, we'll want to take him maybe as my defensive tackle. You could make the argument for 2 all the way down to 5. I think 6 and beyond is kind of don't want to say disrespectful, but I don't think that
He
that's
was my one. He
see
was my
exactly
one pre-draft before Murphy. Now I'm kind of leaning Murphy my one. Even though some other guys went, he's my two. He's my D tackle too. I just love Johnny Newton. I've
yeah.
talked about it a ton. I saw him play a ton at Illinois. Him dropping the second round, I thought was I just can't believe it. I really can't believe he didn't go in the first round. There's so many teams that could have used him. I thought the Commanders stole him in the second round. And, with Jonathan Allen and Darren Payne both there, you've seen what they're doing. I mean, you're a Commanders fan. You've seen they're trying to get younger. They're trying to get younger on defense. They're moving more of the expensive guys out of the way. I'm not scared about Johnny Newton. Defensive tackle leagues, I want him. Actually, him dropping the second round probably helps me because I can probably draft him later now in my leagues. He's a guy I saw a comparison that I had not thought about. And I was like, oh, that is good. Javon
Mm.
Hargrave. Javon Hargrave's former
Right.
Steeler, Niner, and Eagle. They're like, he is like a slightly smaller Hargrave. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. He is. He is that type of guy that you look at him and you're like, oh, is he really that good of a pass rusher? And then you look at the stats and you're like, man, this guy's a freaking beast. He's
Right.
everywhere. He's making plays. I think he has incredible pass rush abilities from the inside. I really do. He's got such a motor. I've been comparing him not because I think he's the same type of player, but I think he could put up similar stats. Is Christian Wilkins, former Dolphins defense tackle, now on the Raiders. He's a guy that I would not be shocked to see him get 50, 60 tackles on a season plus 6, 7, 8 sacks. Like he's a guy, he runs every play down. He never stops. So if you run an outside zone run, he's going to follow that play. And if you cut it back, he's crushing you. Like he's not one of these guys that just stops on the play. It's like, oh, you ran away from me. I'll get you next play. He runs every play down. So I think he's a defensive tackle that can actually like get you actual tackles, which is super hard for that position because a lot of guys don't. You're getting 25 tackles a season. You're hoping to get a couple pressures, couple sacks. He's a guy I think can go beyond that. And I feel like he defensive tackle wise, I think he's got top 5 to top 10 NFL overall potential. I think he could be one of those guys where people are like he's a top 5 to 10 interior player in the NFL. I really think that.
Let's switch defensive line talk a little bit. Let's get into the linebackers. We all know whether you're playing in big play, tackle heavy, or balance, you still need your tackle floor, and that's where your linebackers are going to come in. And the minute I saw this trade happen for Green Bay and they selected Edgerrin Cooper, I was like, yes, yes. Like this makes so much sense. Like you get rid of Devondre Campbell, you still have Quay Walker there. And one of the things we said in the linebacker show is where he lacks, the tackle efficiency in terms of like the high tackle rate and as well as the high missed tackle rate, which is something that you don't want to see in your linebacker. This guy is incredibly rare in terms of being an inside linebacker who gets pressure on the quarterback, who can just attack you from multiple fat areas on the field. And that's exactly what they're probably going to be asking him to do in Green Bay now. I thought this is a great landing spot for him. Somebody who, man, I kind of see him as my LB 2 or 3, to be honest with you, just because I just love the situation in Green Bay and the role he'll be asked to play here. What are your thoughts on Edgerrin Cooper?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he fits in next to Quay Walker. And McDuffie's there. Does he replace McDuffie? Does he move him back? I think that's the big question because I think he's got the talent. And I mean, if he can go in and put anywhere close to the numbers that Devondre Campbell put up, you're like,
Right.
sold, smash sell. I'll throw this in just because we're talking about him already.
Yeah.
Tyron Hopper from Missouri also got drafted the next round by the Packers, which I was a little shocked about that they went right back to the well. He's the guy that could play that third linebacker, because they play a lot of two linebacker sets in Green Bay. But if he could play that third linebacker, plus he's a converted safety, so I think he could play a lot of passing downs as that third linebacker slash safety. He's an interesting guy. I probably wouldn't draft him high. He's a flyer late in drafts or a free agent pickup once you kind of see what he does. But that intrigues me too. But Cooper right now for me, he was my number 2 linebacker pre-draft. He's my number 2 linebacker now. And that's not dogging him. He probably is number 1 for a lot of people. I just have one other guy I really love. That's my linebacker 1. But I think Cooper is way up there. If you're in a tackle heavy league, I can totally see him taking him over all these other guys we've talked about already. I could easily see him being the number one IDP off the board in a lot of leagues.
No, 100%. Let's, even though we were mentioning linebackers, let's stick with Green Bay. Javon Bullard slated in as the free safety here for the Green Bay Packers. Here's the thing. I don't know whether or not you're going to see him playing, free / in coverage a lot for the Green Bay Packers, because last I checked, free agent acquisition Xavier McKinney knows a little something about playing free safety. And it was only until we saw last year, we saw his box snaps go higher than usual. So these two could be interchangeable. What is something that I really liked about Javon Bullard is I liked his ball hawking abilities. And I don't know if this is the a direct comparison I like to make, but I hadn't been excited about a ball hawking safety as I had been since Javon Holland got out of Oregon and went to Miami. I know that's an interesting comparison there, but the point is that the versatility, the dual versatility at the safety position, we have Javon Holland playing a lot in at the line of scrimmage, closer to the line of scrimmage. He could also play in safety. He could play well in coverage. And I think that's what you're getting out of Bullard here. One of these Swiss Army knife defensive backs, somebody that, and probably, if we're talking about offensive and IDP rookie drafts combined, somebody I'm probably targeting in a 4th round combo draft. If I'm doing just an IDP draft, probably somebody who I'm going in late 3rd, early 4th. Because I think everybody's going to be talking about the linebackers. Everybody's going to be talking about the defensive linemen / edge rushers. And anybody who's been watching, JT and myself for the past few months, let's not just throw shade at defensive backs. Like, defensive backs can win you fantasy football championships. And somebody like this who is very versatile, playing opposite somebody who's also playing versatile, like, I understand there's going to be weeks where you're just like, do I start McKinney? Do I start Bullard? Eventually, the numbers are not going to lie, and snaps are going to be snaps. And eventually, you're going to be able to see that there's a direct correlation between fantasy performance and where these snaps are going to be lying to. I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split. I think one person is going to take the majority. But if I had to put my faith into somebody as far as being somebody who I can trust for fantasy, McKinney or Bullard, I like the upside with Bullard in Dynasty.
I love that you brought this up, because I think this is a super, super interesting safety situation in Green Bay. I actually think this Bullard pick helps him and McKinney. I think it actually helps McKinney's draft stock, because here's why. And again, I don't have any inside information, but taking Bullard makes me look at them and go, what were they thinking taking a free safety? I think they think they're going to play McKinney a little more in the box. But I also think because Bullard he's so good at doing multiple things that I think they're like, okay, we can play them both at the same time. One guy in the box, one out, and we can switch. We can trade which guys are moving where. I think they're going to be interchangeable. If I'm a defensive back coach calling coverages, I love this. I love this. I feel like I have 2 safeties that can easily play the deep safety, but also can come up blitz, can come up play the run. And you just don't know which guy's doing which. You can send guys from different multiple positions, because I feel like I'm comfortable in both of their styles that they can do anything I ask. So I'm really going to be keeping an eye early in the season on how Green Bay, they kind of attack things defensively. But I definitely see a world where both these guys are starting and playing at the same time. And they're both playing like 90% of snaps. I really do. Because I think if you sign McKinney to the money you signed him to, and then you turn around and draft Bullard, who's basically seems like he plays the exact same spot, you have looked at and go, oh, we can play these guys together. Because they're, to me, you drafted Bullard way too high if you think he's backing up McKinney. To me,
Right.
to me, that makes no sense. And our guys at our lads, I just looked at it. They've got McKinney at strong safety and Bullard at free safety as the starters. So I think these guys end up playing next to each other. And I think you're right, Jorge. I think Bullard ends up being an absolute steal in rookie IDP drafts. I think people just forget about him. I think they don't think about it because they look at McKinney. I think you can absolutely steal him late. So I am all with you on that. I'm very interested to see what they do on defense there. But man, I said it last year. I'll say it again. This Packers defense is by far the best defense in the AFC North. Like they're just a really loaded group. I love what they've done on defense.
You know, it's funny, unrelated to any football talk, but whenever I hear somebody say, I said it once and I'll say it again, my mind flashes back to, grade school Jorge, where it's like thinking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie where Michelangelo's like, God, I love being a turtle. Because that's exactly what it's about to blurt out the second you said that. And I was like, compose, Jorge, compose.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, love it. I saw every one of the movies in the theater.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Saw everyone, loved it. Still one of my favorite games. What do they have? The 1-ups now. You can buy the 1-up Ninja Turtles. Phenomenal. If you don't have it, buy it. It's great.
Nice. Speaking of things for people to get excited about, let's talk about your LB1 heading into the NFL draft. Junior Colson, or at least you were thinking about moving him to your LB1 during our LB.
He's my LB1, and he solidified that with the draft. Actually, the draft, like, bam, stamped it hard for me as he's him being my LB1. I was super pumped when I saw where he got picked, and I was like, oh, I loved it, and I love it more now.
Yeah, I mean, Kenneth Murray departs in free agency. I believe he goes. Don't quote me on this. I think he went to Carolina, if memory serves me correctly.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. Whatever. Just a guy.
Whatever is about right. We don't really care where he's at. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I'm sure he's a lovely person. Lovely probably is the wrong term to describe him, but I'm sure he's a great person. But for fantasy football, give me Junior Colson. This guy is just walking into snaps, walking into the opportunity. He is definitely a top 5 pick for me for rookie drafts for IDP purposes. And if you're in a tackle heavy league, he's easily your number 1 or number 2. We talked about it again on the going back to our LB show, linebacker show. We wish we would have seen more production from him last year, just because he had a great tackle efficiency and he had a low missed tackle rate. And then you brought up very clearly, the guy played with a freaking club on his hand, one of his hands, for the majority of the season. That's why you weren't seeing the production. Like he had to get some help bringing the guys down, which is why he didn't have the greatest solo to assist ratio in terms of tackle production. But now he's going to be fine. That club's not there anymore. And now he's walking into a high volume of snaps. I mean, what else? What am I missing here? JT.
I can't think of a better situation for a guy going. He has his head coach from college, national champions, Jim Harbaugh, takes over in Los Angeles for the Chargers and then drafts him in the 3rd round. And the funny thing is, this is where everyone thought the Chargers were taking Blake Corum. They're like, oh, they're going to take Blake Corum. Harbaugh's like, nope, I want Junior Colson. Taking him at the top of the this is the part. They took him at the very top of the 3rd round. Was he 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th pick in the 3rd round? They were on him immediately. They had to have him. I'm telling you right now, he's the green dot for the Chargers. He's gonna be the captain. He's gonna wear that green dot. He's gonna be on the field every freaking play. Every play. He walks into a perfect situation with a coach that knows him. He knows the coach. He knows the defensive scheme that they want to run, and the coach trusts him. He was the defensive captain on a national championship team. You cannot walk into a better situation as a rookie. Like, you know what's expected. You know what they want. You know what defense you're doing. This is perfect for him, and he doesn't have – the other thing is, and people don't think about this, he doesn't have a lot of seniority in front of him that have been there forever, have been on the team, that they're like he's got to fight over. I mean, he's got Denzel Perryman, new signee. He's got Dan Henley, who was their third-round pick last year. If you tell me you're taking Junior Colson the same time you took Henley, that's a steal because Junior Colson is a way better linebacker than Henley. And I like Henley. I think he's got some upside, but I think Colson is a tackle machine. I think he's going to be in there. I think you bring the heat with Mack and Bosa on the outside. I mean, that Colson's going to be in there every play. He is and I'm going to regret this because everyone in my leagues are going to steal him from me. But Colson's my 101 in IDP. He just is. I think he has a clear-cut starter role. He's not going to lead the field. And I think this guy has a 10-plus year career as a really good linebacker. Now, is he ever linebacker one? I don't know. But to me, he's a top 10 guy for 10 years. I think he can be a top 10 linebacker for a decade. I really do. So for me, I'm all in on Junior Colson. Guy knows football, and he lands in the absolute perfect spot you could ever freaking wish for as a linebacker in the NFL. So I love it. I'm all in on Junior Colson, which means I'll get 0 of him in fantasy because everybody else is going to take him.
Well, the next linebacker we're going to talk about maybe is somebody that you can get further down your drafts, although I really like the landing spot. Gone is a Landon Roberts, probably from Pittsburgh, and enter Peyton Wilson next to Patrick Queen. Again, snaps. Peyton Wilson was my LB1 heading into the draft. I like the opportunity. I like the placement. I don't like the fact that he's playing next to Patrick Queen, but that's not to say that both of them can't get their cake and eat it too. And the rationale for that is because I liked the high tackle efficiency and the very, very low missed tackle rate, which tells me that he is super efficient. He can get those tackles. He has a great solo to assist ratio. He did in this past season for North Carolina State. And it's Pittsburgh. It's definitely an upgrade over what they had. It is a hard-nosed, running-focused division. He's definitely one of those players who you're just like, I need to grind it out running a linebacker who I just think he's in a great spot here.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, as a Steelers fan, I was psyched to see them get him in the third round. Obviously, the injury concerns dropped him. I mean, if you want a pure talent and production, he's a first-round pick. But inside linebackers dropped in the NFL. It's like running back. People they don't want to spend a high draft capital on it. I thought it was fantastic. I actually think the tackle numbers can be solid even next to Patrick Queen. I mean, Patrick Queen was my number one, free agent signing, IDP signing in the offseason. I freaking loved it. Him going to the Steelers. Atlanta Roberts, he's not done. He's going to be there, but man, we saw what he did last year. He's a run stuffer. He can't guard the pass. He can't get in coverage. He's a go. You just tell him go, and he goes. Like, that's what he does. Dude, Peyton Wilson is just got so much athleticism. You put him and Patrick Queen next together, they might be two of the most athletic linebackers in the league next to each other. And the reason I think it works for them, they run the 3-4. TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are just going to be blitzing. And you know what? They don't have to drop very often now because Wilson and Queen are both good enough to get back in coverage. You can run that 2 deep safety where Wilson can sprint back and cover the middle of the field on any of that middle of the steel stuff. He's shown he can do it in college at NC State. To me, this was, if he can stay healthy, this is an absolute steal for the Steelers. Absolute steal. I mean, I think he could be really good. We don't know about Holcomb coming back from the injury, real bad knee injury. And like I said, Roberts, why I like him, I love his tough, hard-nosed play. He's a run stuffer. That's just all he is. So I think if Wilson can be healthy, man, this linebacking crew, I just look at him like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Peyton Wilson, Queen, Patrick Queen. I mean, that is a fearsome foursome at linebacker. I love what the Steelers did there. Turnover potential. I mean, Butkus Award winner, getting him in the 3rd round. Oh, and the Steelers just, I mean, it's like we always say with wide receivers. They seem to steal a guy. They steal a guy somewhere. They get a guy, and you're like, gosh, we should have got him. Steelers got him. I love it. Even with the drop to the 3rd round, like Colson's still my 101, even with the drop to the round. Peyton Wilson still is my number 6. He's my LB3. He's my number 6 overall, right behind Edger and Cooper. And I think it's not close. Cooper, Wilson, and Colson, I think, are steals at linebacker. They're the 3 guys I want bad in IDP drafts.
Let's go over one more player for today's show, and unless you have one more after the player we're going to be talking about next. And then, of course, for people who want to see more of where we feel other players in this rookie class line up, you can go check out our rankings. JT's over at DLF, as well as mine at fantasyandframes.com as of this coming Friday. Cedric Gray. You know, we were talking about just a few minutes ago, Kenneth Murray. Where did he go? Carolina? No, he went to Tennessee. Okay. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about Jack Gibbons. I think Cedric Gray can earn his way into starter level snaps. And he's, again, one of those players who I think by the end of the season, he'll take on a majority of this. I'd say probably you're going to see him to play probably 70% of snaps by the end of the season. Right now, probably working his way into, the 30s and then the 50s and then 70s by, week 9, and then just take it over from there. I'm not scared of Kenneth Murray holding on to that, position there. I'm not scared of Jack Gibbons, but I think it's going to take some time for Gray to get on the field. Curious to hear your thoughts here.
I agree with you. Gray has moved up for me. Even originally, when I had him after the draft, I had him as my LB5. I had him right behind Trevin Wallace from Kentucky, who went to Carolina in the 3rd round. But the more I'm looking at it, I think Gray definitely has a better shot at starting and playing early. He's moving up to my LB4. Just like you said, I think he beats out the guys that are there. My favorite guy, Al Shair, he's gone. He's in Houston. I think that linebacking core is wide open. So I love where your head's at in Gray. And just before we close it out, because I don't want to ever leave DBs out, even though everybody wants to hate the DBs. I'm going to throw you my 2 favorite DBs right now. So my favorite guy, Tyler Nubin, Minnesota, going to the Giants in the 2nd round. He's replacing Xavier McKinney. He's your guy. If you love Xavier McKinney, draft Tyler Nubin. He's there. He's going to play every down right from the beginning. Absolutely love him. I've compared him to Antonio Winfield. I think he's a guy who can play deep safety, but still make plays, still get turnovers, can still rush the passer. So I really like him a lot. He's my number 1 DB. I got him as my number 10 overall player. And then a guy that's a little controversial, but I'm on him. I like him, and I want to see what he can do, is Cooper DeJean from Iowa going to the Eagles. They've got him slotted right now to play cornerback. I think he can play slot corner or safety. I really think he could move around a lot. I think he's got those abilities to just play everywhere. Also, with the new rules on kick and punt return,
Mm.
gosh, he's got those crazy skills. And you know how guys like to play rookies at kick and punt. You're a Tyreek Hill year 3 when you're a stud, they quit letting you return. But when you're a rookie, they let you return. And I tell you what, if you're an IDP league that counts kick and punt return yards, a DB that gets special team points just takes that guy up an extra notch. I mean, because they're just even if it's 3 to 5 extra points on special teams, boom,
Right.
it just knocks that guy up on defense a ton. I'm on Cooper DeJean for that reason. I think he's underrated right now. I think the Eagles will figure out a way to use him in a variety of ways. I just think he's a special athlete, and the special teams put it over the top for me. So defensively, I'm not off on him as a cornerback. If he gets listed as a corner and plays some safety and does returns in a league that you have to start cornerback, but I'm buying because I'm starting him every week as my starting cornerback in IDP.
Nice. Well, that's gonna. By the way, the embarrassment of riches that the Philadelphia Eagles find on defense every single year in the first round.
How does everyone fall to him? How does
I
they get Quinyon Mitchell, who everyone says is the number one guy that should have gone top 10, top 15? He falls to him, and then Deshaun, which everyone said, oh, he's top 25, top 20. Everyone had him going there. Then he falls in the second round. They get him in the second round. It's amazing how everyone. It feels like that guy in your fantasy league that always lucks out. It's like wherever he's drafting, he always gets the guy that he doesn't need, but the guy that's like a super good player. And you're like, how did he get him again? Like, how did he luck into that guy? I feel like that's the Eagles, man. They just always get guys that fall to them in just the right spots. In a team that was awesome last year, but had terrible cornerbacks, they turn around and get 2 of the best in this draft.
100%. All right, folks, that's going to do it all for Shoot the Gap tonight. Again, if you want to see more of our rookie IDP rankings, for JT, head over to DLF. For me, head over to fantasyandframes.com. Next week, we may even do, I don't know, JT, you and I were talking about this pre-show. I think we should do an offensive rookie and an IDP rookie mock draft. I think the people
love that idea. I've got a lot of people hit me up. They're like, I've been looking for offensive and defensive combined IDP rookie drafts. And I'm like, ooh, I was like, that could be interesting. So, Jorge, I love that idea.
You know what? Screw it. Let's make this happen. We're going to do that next week on Shoot the Gap. Here,
what we need to do, Jorge, is if anybody wants to get in on that draft with us,
yes,
they should message you. They should get on there and message you if you want to get in and jump into that mock draft and kind of see what it's like. It'd be nice if we get a little group together. If we don't, it'll be me and you. But if we can get a group of people together, it'd be kind of nice to see what everybody thinks.
You know what? We can get a group that, and we know not everybody plays IDP, but if we can get some on that are just offensive people and then some on that are just defensive people, and you put us all together in one group, who knows? Maybe they'll convert one another and we can have more IDP players in the fantasy football.
I love it.
So anyhow, JT, as always, it is great talking shop with you. Next week, folks, again, doing a combined offense and IDP rookie mock draft. So for JT, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Nope. Follow me at JT Orange. I got all kinds of IDP article stuff on DLF. Also looking to put out some really nice IDP stuff coming out here on Fantasy and Frames. Now that the draft's over, I got a little more time to write. So hopefully be putting out some IDP articles here shortly on Fantasy and Frames.
Yep, and you can check out his latest article at fantasyandframes.com looking at Aziz Al-Shair. As soon as you get to the homepage, boom, article right there. So check out JT's work over at fantasyandframes.com. And with that, folks, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Everybody who's been here watching us talk some defensive football late on a Wednesday night, we love you. We appreciate you. And until next week.